The heavy iron collar bit into Ilara's pale neck as she shivered in the autumn chill. Market Square, normally bustling with merchants and farmers, had transformed into a theatre of cruelty, with her slender form as the unwilling centerpiece. The crowd that had gathered to witness her punishment was thinning as evening approached, though their absence brought no relief. Soon night would fall, and with it would come the creatures that stalked the darkness beyond Blackmere's protective walls. "Water," a small voice whispered. A child, no more than 8 years old, offered a ladle through the jeering onlookers. Ilara's cracked lips parted to accept the mercy, but before the water could reach her, a guardsman knocked the ladle away with the blunt end of his spear. "The Bride of Death needs no refreshment," he growled, sending the child scurrying away. "Judge Caldwell's orders. She receives nothing until sunrise, should she live to see it." Ilara closed her eyes, the chains rattling as she shifted her weight on her bruised knees. 3 days she had been here, displayed like chattel in a market that traded only in humiliation. Her white bridal gown, once pristine and adorned with freshwater pearls painstakingly sewn by her mother, now hung in tatters, stained with dirt and spots of her own blood. The crime for which she had been condemned still seemed impossible even to her. Witchcraft, murder, conspiracy against the crown, all because she had been found kneeling beside Lord Blackwood's body on what should have been her wedding night, her hands stained red with his blood. She had not killed him. She had merely found him that way, his throat torn open as if by a wild animal. But the evidence had been damning, and her peculiar green eyes and the strange birthmark on her shoulder had been enough for the superstitious townsfolk to label her a witch. In truth, Ilara had never wanted to marry Lord Blackwood. At 45, he was 3 times her age, with a reputation for cruelty that extended well beyond the walls of his manor. But her father's mounting debts had left little choice. "You will save us all," he had whispered as he handed her over to the nobleman. What her father hadn't known was that someone or something had saved her instead. The market bell tolled 6 times. Merchants hastily packed their remaining wares, casting wary glances at the darkening sky. Blackmere had existed under a strict curfew for generations. No one ventured out after nightfall, not since the ancient pact had been broken. "Aren't you going to unchain her?" a woman asked the guard as she hurried past with her basket of unsold bread. "The night comes." The guard's laughter was cold. "That's the point. Judge Caldwell wants the darkness to claim this one, fitting punishment for a witch who murdered her bridegroom." As the square emptied, panic rose in Ilara's throat. The tales of what lurked beyond the village walls had frightened her since childhood. The vampires of the North Woods, the ancient lords who had once demanded blood tribute from Blackmere until a holy order of knights had driven them back centuries ago. The pact that followed was simple. The villagers would remain within their walls at night, and the creatures would not breach them. But those found outside after dark were fair game, with no protection under the ancient agreement. And now she was to be that sacrifice. Lanterns were extinguished one by one until only the guard's post remained illuminated. The air grew colder, and mist began to curl around the cobblestones, seeping between the market stalls like phantom fingers. "Please," Ilara's voice was barely audible, her throat raw from lack of water. "Don't leave me here. I didn't kill him." The guard glanced at her, and for a moment something like pity crossed his weathered face. But then he hardened. "I have a family to feed. I can't go against the judge." With those words, he retreated to his post at the edge of the square, close enough to observe, but far enough to survive should anything emerge from the darkness. The last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, plunging Market Square into shadow. The mist thickened, and with it came an unnatural silence. No crickets chirped, no nightbirds called, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Ilara strained against her chains, the metal links clinking in the stillness. The sound felt obscenely loud, like a beacon announcing her presence to whatever might be listening. Her heartbeat quickened as she scanned the darkened periphery of the square. Was that movement between the buildings, a deeper shadow among shadows? A soft thud behind her made her flinch. The guard's lantern had gone out, plunging the square into complete darkness. She heard a muffled cry, then silence. "Guard!" she called, her voice trembling. "Are you there?" No answer came. The air grew impossibly colder, raising gooseflesh along her arms. The mist now swirled at waist height, obscuring the ground around her. And then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching from behind. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. She could not turn to see what approached, the collar and chains holding her firmly in place. All she could do was wait, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The footsteps stopped directly behind her. She could feel a presence, something ancient and powerful, looming over her kneeling form. Then a voice, deep and melodious, with an accent that belonged to no region she knew. "What a peculiar offering the village has left." Cold fingers brushed against her neck, tracing the line of the iron collar. Ilara shuddered, but did not scream. Strange how fear could freeze the voice. The figure circled around to face her, and despite the darkness, she could see him clearly, as if he emanated his own faint luminescence. He was tall, impossibly so, with features so perfectly formed they seemed carved from marble. His eyes, however, betrayed his inhuman nature. They glowed a deep crimson, like embers in a dying fire. He wore clothing from another era, a high-collared black coat with intricate silver embroidery, a waistcoat of midnight blue, and a cravat secured with a ruby pin. His long hair, as dark as a raven's wing, was tied back with a silver cord, but most striking was his stillness. He moved when he chose to move, and when stationary, not even his chest rose with breath. "You are the bride," he stated, kneeling to examine her face. "The one they claim murdered Lord Blackwood." Finding her voice at last, Ilara whispered, "I didn't kill him." A smile curved his bloodless lips. "Of course you didn't." He inhaled deeply, though she suspected it was more for information than necessity. "I can smell his blood on you still, but also your innocence." His cold fingers tilted her chin upward, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Do you know what I am, little bride?" "Vampire," she breathed, the word barely audible. "Indeed." He seemed pleased with her recognition. "Silas Vane, Lord of the North Woods and keeper of the ancient pact. Your people so conveniently remember only when it suits them." His fingers moved to the chain securing her to the iron post. With a casual flick of his wrist, the metal, which would require a blacksmith's strongest tools to break, snapped like thread. "The man they forced you to marry," Silas continued, his voice casual as if discussing the weather, "was trying to renegotiate our arrangement. He sought to offer me something more valuable than the simple peace we've maintained." Ilara's mind raced. What could he possibly offer a vampire lord? Blood. Silas's eyes flared brighter. Young blood. He proposed to allow my kind to take one villager each month in exchange for protection against neighboring kingdoms. He would choose who was to be sacrificed, of course. The poor, the troublesome, those he deemed expendable. Horror crept through Ilara's veins. That's monstrous. Coming from a human, that assessment is rich with irony. Silas's laugh was without humor. "I refused his offer. Contrary to what your kind believes, we do not all revel in senseless slaughter. The pact has served both our peoples well enough." The vampire lord circled her again, his movements fluid as water. "Lord Blackwood did not take my refusal with grace. He threatened to expose the location of our sanctuary to the Knights of the Hallowed Flame, so one of my kind silenced him, permanently, and I was blamed," Ilara whispered, the pieces falling into place. "Indeed, the convenient witch bride, found with blood on her hands." Silas knelt before her again. "Judge Caldwell knows the truth, of course. He and Blackwood were conspirators. Your punishment was designed not just to eliminate a witness, but to send me a message." Ilara shivered as Silas reached for the iron collar around her neck. With disturbing ease, he snapped it open, revealing the raw, chafed skin beneath. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, rubbing her freed neck. "Why not just—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Feed on you?" Silas completed her thought, amusement flickering in his inhuman eyes. "Because, Ilara Thornfield, you are far more valuable to me alive." The sound of her full name on his lips startled her. "How do you—" "I know many things, including that the birthmark on your shoulder, the one they claim marks you as a witch, is actually the sigil of a bloodline thought long extinct." His cold fingers brushed aside the torn fabric of her gown, revealing the crescent-shaped mark. "The bloodline of the Sentinels, humans born with the rare ability to walk between worlds, our world and yours, without harm." The mist around them thickened as distant shouts echoed from the village gates. Torchlight appeared at the far end of Market Square, a search party, realizing perhaps that something had gone wrong with their cruel plan. "They're coming," Ilara whispered, sudden fear gripping her. Not fear of the vampire, strangely, but of returning to her chains. Silas rose to his full height, offering her a hand. "They are too late. You have a choice now, Ilara Thornfield. Return to those who would see you dead for a crime you did not commit, or come with me to my domain. To be your prey," she asked, even as her hand drifted toward his. "To be under my protection," he corrected, "in exchange for understanding the power that lies dormant in your blood. The judge knows what you are, or at least suspects. It is why he feared you enough to eliminate you." The torches grew brighter, the shouts clearer. Soon they would reach the market. "I don't understand any of this," Ilara admitted, her head spinning with revelations. "You will," Silas promised, "but you must decide now. Freedom with uncertainty or certain death among your own kind." When she placed her trembling hand in his fingers closed around hers with surprising gentleness. The cold of his touch sent a shiver through her that was not entirely from fear. "A wise choice," he murmured. The mist swirled around them, thickening until it obscured everything beyond their immediate vicinity. Ilara felt a strange lightness, as if gravity had loosened its hold on her. Then came a rushing sensation, like falling upward into a night sky without stars. As the world dissolved around them, the last thing she saw was the search party bursting into Market Square, Judge Caldwell at their lead. The old man's face contorted in fury and fear as he glimpsed what was happening. The vampire lord, the freed prisoner, the mist that consumed them both. "Find her!" His voice echoed distantly. "The witch cannot be allowed to reach the North Woods alive. If she awakens her blood, we are all doomed." Then everything vanished, replaced by rushing darkness and the secure grip of Silas's hand around hers. Ilara Thornfield, the accused witch bride who had awaited death in the Market Square, was gone, claimed by the vampire lord of the North Woods and carried toward a destiny she could not begin to comprehend. As consciousness began to fade, overwhelmed by the journey between worlds, a final thought drifted through her mind. She was no longer awaiting death. But what awaited her instead might prove far more complex than the simple end she had expected in chains. The world rematerialized in fragments, first sensation, then sound, finally sight. Ilara's knees gave way as solid ground returned beneath her feet. Strong hands caught her before she fell, keeping her upright as her senses adjusted to their new surroundings. "The first crossing is always disorienting." Silas's voice came from somewhere above her. "Breathe deeply. It will pass." When Ilara's vision cleared, she found herself standing in a vast entrance hall, unlike anything she had ever seen. Towering stone walls rose to vaulted ceilings where crystal chandeliers hung, their countless facets catching and reflecting the blue-white glow of flameless lamps. Beneath her feet lay an intricate mosaic floor depicting ancient battles between creatures she could not name. The air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of pine, old books, and something metallic she dared not identify. "Welcome to Ravenscroft," Silas said, releasing her once he was certain she could stand alone. "My ancestral home, and now your sanctuary." Ilara turned slowly, taking in the enormity of the space. Marble staircases curved upward on either side of the hall, leading to shadowed galleries. Between them stood a massive fireplace where blue flames danced without consuming their wood. "This is impossible," she whispered. "We're in the North Woods. But I've seen the woods from Blackmere's walls. There are no structures like this." Silas's mouth curved in amusement. "Your kind sees only what we permit them to see. Ravenscroft exists in what you might call a fold in the world, present yet veiled." He moved away from her with that unnatural grace, his footsteps making no sound on the stone floor. "Come. You require rest, food, and clean garments. We can discuss your many questions afterward." As they ascended one of the staircases, Ilara became acutely aware of her disheveled state. Her torn wedding dress, matted hair, and the grime of 3 days in the market square. She self-consciously touched the raw skin of her neck where the iron collar had chafed. "Does it pain you greatly?" Silas asked without turning. "How did you—" "Your heartbeat quickens when you touch it." He glanced back, those crimson eyes glowing softly in the dim light of the gallery. "Vampire hearing is rather acute." They passed through corridors lined with paintings whose subjects seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of the eye. Occasionally, shadows moved in doorways or alcoves. Other inhabitants of this strange domain, Ilara presumed, though none revealed themselves fully. Finally, they reached a set of double doors carved with intricate vines and crescent moons. Silas pushed them open to reveal a sumptuous bedchamber. "These quarters will be yours," he said, stepping aside to allow her entry. "They once belonged to another of your kind, who sought refuge here." The room was larger than her family's entire cottage in Blackmere. A 4-poster bed draped in midnight blue velvet dominated one wall. A fireplace crackled with normal orange flames, warming the space. A copper bathtub stood before it, already filled with steaming water and scattered with flower petals. "Another human lived here?" Ilara asked, moving cautiously into the room. "Many have, over the centuries." Silas remained at the threshold. "Though none with your particular lineage, in nearly 200 years. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. A young woman entered, carrying a tray of food and a bundle of clothing. Her eyes were a normal human brown, her skin warm with color, but the graceful, silent way she moved betrayed her nature. "This is Lyra," Silas said. "She will attend to your needs." Lyra curtsied slightly. "My lord has instructed me to assist you in any way required, Lady Thornfield." "I'm no lady," Ilara said automatically. "Here you are what I say you are," Silas replied, "and I say you are to be treated with the respect due your bloodline." He turned to leave. "Once you have rested and refreshed yourself, Lyra will bring you to the library. There is much you need to learn." When the door closed behind him, Ilara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Lyra set down her burdens and approached the bath. "The water is infused with healing herbs," she explained, her voice musical and light. "It will ease the pain of your wounds. Are you—" Ilara hesitated, unsure how to phrase her question politely. "A vampire?" Lyra smiled, revealing teeth that were perfectly normal. "No, I am what they call a bound, a human who has chosen to serve the vampire court voluntarily." She gestured to a small crescent-shaped scar at her wrist. "We give blood when needed, but we are not prey. We are valued for our service." As Lyra helped her out of the tattered wedding dress, Ilara winced at the sight of her own body, bruised, dirty, with angry red marks where the chains had cut into her skin. "Lord Vane was furious when he saw what they had done to you," Lyra commented, helping Ilara into the bath. The warm water stung her raw skin momentarily before soothing it. "I have not seen him so angry in decades." "You speak as if you've known him a long time," Ilara observed, sinking deeper into the fragrant water. 53 years, Lyra confirmed without a trace of irony, though she appeared no older than 30. The bound age very slowly once accepted into service. Another benefit of the arrangement, As Ilara soaked, Lyra explained more about Ravenscroft, how it housed not only Lord Vane, but a court of lesser vampires who acknowledged his authority, how humans like herself served willingly in exchange for protection and certain privileges, how the North Woods were not merely a forest, but a borderland between the human world and realms even Lyra had never seen. "And this mark?" Ilara asked, touching the crescent birthmark on her shoulder. "Lord Vane said it belongs to something called the Sentinel bloodline." Lyra's hands paused as she rinsed Ilara's hair. "It is not my place to explain such matters. Lord Vane will tell you what you need to know." Her voice had grown cautious. "But I will say this, your arrival has caused quite a stir among the court. Many believed your kind extinct." After the bath, Ilara dressed in the clothing Lyra had brought. A simple but elegantly cut gown of deep green velvet, soft leather shoes, and undergarments of a quality Ilara had never worn before. As Lyra brushed and styled her hair, Ilara ate ravenously from the tray of bread, cheese, and fruit, realizing how desperately hungry she had become during her ordeal. "You should rest before meeting with Lord Vane," Lyra suggested, gesturing toward the bed. "The crossing between realms takes a toll on human bodies." Though Ilara wanted immediate answers to her countless questions, exhaustion was quickly overtaking her. The comfort of the bed after days of kneeling on cobblestones was overwhelming. Despite her determination to remain alert in this strange place, sleep claimed her almost instantly. Her dreams were vivid and unsettling, running through endless forest paths, pursued by something she couldn't see. Judge Caldwell's face transforming into something inhuman as he condemned her. And strangest of all, a woman with Ilara's same green eyes and crescent birthmark, reaching out across a chasm of darkness, her lips forming words Ilara couldn't hear. She awoke with a gasp to find the room darkened except for the fireplace's glow. How long had she slept? The windows showed only night sky, offering no clue to the hour. As she sat up, she noticed fresh clothing laid out, a more formal gown of midnight blue with silver embroidery that mimicked the pattern of her birthmark. "You're awake." Lyra emerged from the shadows of an adjoining dressing room. "Lord Vane awaits you in the library." As they traversed the labyrinthine corridors of Ravenscroft, Ilara became aware of eyes watching from darkened doorways and alcoves. Occasionally, she caught glimpses of pale faces and glowing eyes before they vanished like smoke. "They're curious about you," Lyra explained quietly. "A sentinel has not walked these halls in generations." "What exactly is a sentinel?" Ilara pressed. "Everyone seems to know except me." Before Lyra could answer, or more likely deflect the question again, they arrived at a set of massive oak doors engraved with intertwining trees whose branches formed an arch. "The Great Library," Lyra announced, pushing open the doors. The chamber beyond defied comprehension. Bookshelves stretched upward for at least 4 stories, connected by wrought iron staircases and walkways. The ceiling was a dome of colored glass, depicting a night sky with constellations Ilara had never seen. Globes and astronomical instruments dotted reading areas between the shelves, while massive tables held open volumes and ancient maps. Near the center of the vast room, Silas Vane stood before a circular table covered with open books and scrolls. He had changed into less formal attire, a simple black shirt and trousers that somehow made him look more approachable, though no less imposing. "Leave us, Lyra," he commanded without looking up. The woman bowed and retreated, closing the doors behind her. Only when they were alone did Silas raise his gaze to Ilara. "You look more yourself now that you've rested," he observed. "The color has returned to your cheeks." "I'm not sure who myself is anymore," Ilara replied, approaching the table cautiously. "Everyone here seems to know more about me than I do." A smile ghosted across his face, direct and forthright. "Good. We haven't time for courtly games of words." He gestured to the material spread before him. "What do you know of your family history, Ilara Thornfield?" She shrugged. "Little enough. My father was a merchant, before debt reduced him to near poverty. My mother died when I was young. My grandmother raised me until her death 3 winters ago. And before that, what of your grandmother's parents, or their parents before them? My grandmother spoke little of the past. She seemed afraid of it somehow. Ilara's brow furrowed as she recalled something, though she did have a strange ritual. On each new moon, she would trace my birthmark with herbal oil and whisper words I couldn't understand. Silas nodded as if this confirmed something. Your grandmother was protecting you, hiding what you are from those who would exploit or destroy it. He gestured to an ancient leather-bound book on the table. The mark you bear identifies you as a descendant of the Sentinel Order, humans born with the ability to perceive and manipulate the boundaries between worlds. He turned the book toward her. On its yellowed pages was an illustration of a woman with upraised hands, standing between 2 spheres, one dark, one light. Around her neck was a pendant bearing the same crescent shape as Ilara's birthmark. For millennia, Sentinels maintained the balance between the human realm and what your kind now call the supernatural. They could walk between worlds freely, carrying messages, negotiating treaties, and when necessary, sealing breaches between dimensions. Ilara studied the illustration, a chill running through her as she recognized the woman's eyes, the same unusual green as her own. This can't possibly relate to me. I'm just a merchant's daughter from Blackmere. You are far more. Silas moved around the table to stand beside her. When the hallowed Flame Knights rose to power 3 centuries ago, they systematically hunted down and eliminated the Sentinel Order, believing their abilities to be witchcraft. They feared what they could not control. His fingers traced the illustration's crescent symbol. The few survivors went into hiding, concealing their abilities even from their own children. They became merchants, farmers, craftspeople, ordinary humans to all outward appearances. But the blood remembers, even when the mind forgets. And you believe I have these abilities? Ilara asked, struggling to absorb the implications. I know you do. How do you think you survived the crossing to Ravenscroft? Any ordinary human would have been rendered unconscious, perhaps even killed. Yet you remained aware, if disoriented. He closed the book carefully. Judge Caldwell and Lord Blackwood suspected what you were. The arranged marriage was no coincidence. Blackwood intended to use your dormant abilities once they were awakened. Ilara's mind raced, pieces falling into place. The strange tea he insisted I drink daily after our engagement. He said it would prepare me for wifely duties. Silas's expression darkened. Preparation indeed. Likely a diluted form of the awakening elixir, designed to gradually activate your abilities without your knowledge. Had you consumed it long enough, your powers would have manifested under his control. But how would they even know what I am? My grandmother kept it secret, even from me. Your eyes, Silas said simply. That particular shade of green appears only in Sentinel bloodlines. And Caldwell is far older than he appears. He was a young knight during the purges. He would recognize the signs. A knock at the library doors interrupted them. Silas frowned at the disturbance. Enter. A male vampire Ilara hadn't seen before strode in. Unlike Silas's regal bearing, this one moved with predatory intensity, his pale features sharp and angular beneath short silver-blonde hair. He wore what appeared to be armor of black leather, reinforced with metal plates. "My lord," he addressed Silas with a curt bow, "scouts report movement at Blackmere's eastern gate. Armed men gathering, at least 20, bearing the emblem of the hallowed flame." Silas's expression hardened. "So soon. Caldwell works quickly." He turned to Ilara. "It seems your former neighbors have called for reinforcements. The knights rarely venture into these woods without significant cause. They're coming for me," Ilara realized, dread pooling in her stomach. "For you and for us." Silas nodded to the messenger. "Prepare the defenses, Kane. Alert the court. No one hunts in the outer woods until further notice." As Cain departed, Silas returned his attention to Ilara. We have less time than I hoped. Your abilities must be awakened now, before they breach the outer boundaries. Wait, Ilara protested, backing away slightly. I don't understand any of this. You said Blackwood was trying to awaken these powers to control me. How is this different? Because I offer you choice, not control. Silas's voice remained calm despite the urgency of the situation. The awakening itself is neutral. It simply activates what already lies dormant in your blood. What follows is determined by your will, not mine. He moved to a cabinet near the far wall, removing a small crystal vial containing iridescent liquid that shifted colors as it caught the light. This elixir was created centuries ago by sentinels themselves, for their own children's awakening ceremonies. It is not the corrupted version Blackwood attempted to use. Ilara stared at the swirling liquid. And if I refuse, then I will still protect you as promised, Silas said without hesitation. But understand this, the Knights will not stop hunting you, awakened or not. And without your abilities, Ravenscroft's defenses may not be enough to save either of us. Another knock, more urgent this time. Lyra entered without waiting for permission, her usually composed features tense with worry. My lord, Lady Varen demands audience immediately. She says she's seen something in the pools. Silas's expression changed subtly. The first time Ilara had seen anything approaching genuine alarm cross his features. Tell her I come directly. He turned back to Ilara. You must decide quickly. The Knights of the Hallowed Flame do not show mercy to those they deem abominations, human or vampire. He placed the crystal vial on the table between them. Your choice, Ilara Thornfield. Remain as you are, a human woman with a power she can never access, or become what you were born to be, a sentinel, a walker between worlds, master of boundaries that others cannot even perceive. The vial gleamed in the library's soft light, its contents continuing their hypnotic color shifts. In its swirling depths, Ilara imagined she saw fragments of possibilities, freedom, power, understanding, but also danger, responsibility, and paths that could never be unwalked. What would happen if I drank it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Pain initially, Silas answered with brutal honesty, then awareness of the world as it truly is, not as human perception limits it. Finally, ability, to see the boundaries between realms and with training to manipulate them. Outside, distant horns sounded, 3 long blasts that echoed through Ravenscroft's stone halls. Silas's head turned sharply toward the sound. They've crossed the outer boundary, he said grimly. We have hours at most before they reach the veil that conceals Ravenscroft itself. Ilara's hand moved toward the vial, then hesitated. 3 days ago, she had been a bride preparing for a marriage she dreaded. Now she stood in a vampire's castle, contemplating drinking a mystical elixir to awaken ancient powers, while knights who had once been legends in bedtime stories hunted her. Will it hurt anyone else? She asked. These abilities, can they be used to harm? All power can harm, Silas replied, but the Sentinel Order was created to maintain balance, not disrupt it. Their greatest oath was to protect the boundaries between worlds, not destroy them. Another horn blast, closer now. Shouts echoed from distant corridors as Ravenscroft's inhabitants prepared for potential siege. Ilara thought of Judge Caldwell's face as the mist had consumed her in Market Square. Not just anger, but fear. Fear of what she might become. Fear that had driven him to chain her in the square as sacrifice. With sudden resolve, she reached for the vial. If they fear what I might be this much, she said, breaking the seal with her thumb, perhaps I should discover exactly why. She raised the vial to her lips, the liquid scent both sweet and sharp. Silas watched without interference, his crimson eyes reflecting something that might have been respect. 2 choices, Ilara whispered, and drank. For 1 heartbeat, nothing happened. Then fire erupted in her veins, molten, agonizing fire that spread from her core to every extremity. She gasped, the empty vial slipping from her fingers to shatter on the floor. Her legs gave way, but before she could fall, strong arms caught her. Through the haze of pain, she was vaguely aware of being carried. Silas's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Hold fast, Sentinel! The awakening has begun." The agony intensified until Ilara was certain she would be consumed by it. But underneath the pain, something else stirred. A sense of expanding awareness, as if walls she hadn't known existed were crumbling within her mind. Colors became more vivid, sounds more distinct. The very air around her seemed suddenly visible, currents and eddies of energy flowing like water. And beneath it all, a rhythmic pulsing, the boundaries between worlds she somehow knew vibrating like the strings of an instrument only she could hear. As consciousness began to fade, overwhelmed by sensation, Ilara glimpsed figures gathering around her. Silas, Lyra, others she didn't recognize. Among them stood a woman with silver hair and milky white eyes, her ageless face marked with concern. "The knights approach from the east," the blind woman was saying, her voice echoing strangely in Ilara's enhanced perception. "But that is not what I saw in the pools, Silas. Something else comes with them, something that should not be." "What, Varen?" Silas demanded. "What accompanies them?" The woman's sightless eyes seemed to find Ilara despite her blindness. "A breach, the largest I've seen in centuries. The knights have broken the ancient seals, and now the void hungers for the last sentinel." Darkness claimed Ilara then, but not before she felt something new stirring within her blood. Power, ancient and familiar, responding to her awakening like an old friend returning from a long journey. And with it came understanding. The knights weren't just hunting her to destroy a witch. They needed a sentinel, the last sentinel. And whatever they had unleashed from the void could only be contained by the very power they had spent centuries trying to eradicate. Consciousness returned to Ilara in fragments. First, the sensation of silk sheets beneath her fingertips, then the crackling of a nearby fire, and finally, voices arguing in hushed tones. Her body felt simultaneously leaden and weightless, as if she were floating within her own skin. When she opened her eyes, the world had changed. Colors possessed depth and dimension she'd never perceived before. The blue flames in the fireplace pulsed with energy she could somehow taste as well as see. The air itself seemed visible, currents of translucent energy swirling around the room's occupants. "She's awake," came Lyra's voice, though Ilara noticed the woman's lips moved slightly before the sound reached her ears, as if time itself had become unsynchronized. Silas approached the bed, his form trailed by a subtle aura that shifted between crimson and midnight blue. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice resonating on multiple levels that made Ilara wince. "Everything is too much," she managed, her own voice sounding foreign to her ears. "I can see things I shouldn't be able to see." "Your senses are recalibrating," explained the silver-haired woman with milky eyes, whom Ilara had glimpsed before losing consciousness. "The boundaries between perception and reality have thinned for you." Ilara struggled to sit up, noticing with alarm that her hands left trails of faint luminescence when she moved them. "What's happening to me?" "Your sentinel abilities are manifesting," Silas explained, his tone measured. "Lady Varen will help you gain control." The blind woman, Varen, approached, placing cool fingers against Ilara's temples. "Focus on my touch," she instructed. "Picture a door in your mind. Close it part way, but not completely." Ilara did as instructed, imagining a heavy wooden door slowly swinging shut. As it closed in her mind's eye, the overwhelming sensations diminished to a manageable level. The world still appeared enhanced, but no longer overwhelmingly so. "Better," she breathed, the relief evident in her voice. "A temporary measure," Varen cautioned. "You must learn proper control, but there isn't time for the usual training." A distant horn blast reminded Ilara of the approaching threat. "The knights, they've breached the middle boundary," Silas confirmed grimly. "They move faster than any human patrol should be capable of traversing these woods." Because something guides them, Varen added. Something that has been waiting centuries for a sentinel to awaken. She turned her sightless eyes toward Ilara. The breach I saw in the pools. It's an ancient wound in reality, torn open by forbidden rituals. I don't understand, Ilara said, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Her dizziness had subsided, replaced by a strange clarity. What exactly do these knights want with me? Silas and Varen exchanged a look, loaded with unspoken communication. The truth, please, Ilara demanded, surprising herself with her assertiveness. No more half-answers or mysteries. Silas nodded, respect evident in his expression. 3 centuries ago, during their crusade against your kind, the Knights of the Hallowed Flame discovered something they didn't expect. That sentinels weren't merely communicating with other realms, they were maintaining the boundaries between them. When they slaughtered the Sentinel Order, Varen continued, those boundaries began to weaken. Desperate to prevent what they'd done, they captured the last remaining sentinels and forced them to perform a sealing ritual before executing them. But the seal was imperfect, Silas added. It required blood sacrifice to maintain sentinel blood. With each generation, they've hunted down those with the bloodline, using their deaths to renew the failing seals. Horror washed over Ilara as comprehension dawned. Judge Caldwell. He knew what I was. The execution in the square wasn't punishment. It was to be a ritual sacrifice, Silas confirmed. When I took you, I disrupted their plans. Now they come with desperation, because the seal has finally failed completely. And what lies beyond this seal? Ilara asked, though some part of her already knew the answer. The void, Varen whispered, the word carrying weight beyond its single syllable. A realm of non-existence that hungers for ours. The breach allows its essence to seep through, and with it, creatures that should never enter our reality. A commotion from the hallway interrupted them. The doors burst open as Cain entered, his armor now bearing fresh gashes. My lord, he addressed Silas urgently, the knights have broken through the veil. They're at the outer walls, but they're not alone. Shadow walkers accompany them. Silas's face hardened. Void touched. So they've made pacts with the very forces they claim to fight. He turned to Ilara. Can you walk? She nodded, finding strength returning to her limbs with surprising speed. What are shadow walkers? Humans who've allowed void essence to corrupt them in exchange for power, Varen explained, as they moved quickly from the chamber. They can pass through solid matter, become invisible at will, and drain life with a touch. The corridors of Ravenscroft had transformed into organized chaos. Vampires and bound humans moved with purpose, carrying weapons and setting defenses. Through windows, Ilara glimpsed the grounds below. Torchlight illuminated armored figures approaching the castle's massive front gates. Interspersed among them were darker shapes that seemed to flicker in and out of visibility, leaving trails of mist in their wake. We cannot fight a war on 2 fronts, Silas stated as they descended a spiral staircase. The knights are formidable enough, but the shadow walkers will penetrate our defenses from within. They reached what appeared to be a war room, where maps lay spread across a central table. Other vampires gathered around, including a woman with flame-red hair whose leather armor marked her as a warrior. Isolde, Silas addressed her, take your hunters and focus on the shadow walkers. They'll try to open the gates from inside. With pleasure, she replied, baring fangs before departing with several others. Ilara approached the table, studying the maps. To her enhanced vision, they appeared to glow faintly along certain lines. What are these markings? She asked, pointing to intersecting patterns. Boundary lines, Varen explained, somehow aware of exactly what Ilara indicated despite her blindness. Natural weak points between our realm and others. Ravenscroft was built upon a major convergence. A thunderous crash shook the castle foundations. Dust drifted from the ceiling as shouts echoed from above. They've breached the lower bailey, Cain reported after listening to a message delivered by another vampire. And something else is happening at the eastern tower, a distortion in the air. The breach widens, Varen murmured. We have little time. Silas turned to Elara, his expression grave. There is a choice before you, though it's an unfair one to place on your shoulders. The knights seek to capture you and use your blood to reseal the breach their ancestors created. The sacrifice would kill you, and if they fail, Elara asked, the breach will continue expanding until the void consumes everything. First Ravenscroft, then the North Woods, eventually the entire realm. He paused, crimson eyes holding hers. But there is another way, one the knights either don't know or refuse to consider. A sentinel can repair the breach without dying, Varen interjected, by channeling power through themselves rather than from themselves. But it requires training few possess and risks the sentinel's sanity if performed incorrectly. Another crash, closer this time, followed by the distinct sound of battle, metal against metal, inhuman screeches and chilling screams. How would I even begin to attempt this? Elara asked, her mind racing. I can guide you, Varen said. I was bound to a sentinel once, centuries ago. I remember the methods, though I cannot perform them myself. It's too dangerous, Silas objected. She's barely awakened. The power could tear her apart. And your alternative? Varen challenged. Let the knights sacrifice her? Or watch the void devour us all? Before Silas could respond, the doors to the war room burst inward. 3 shadow walkers materialized, humanoid figures wrapped in writhing darkness, their features indistinct except for glowing violet eyes. Behind them came knights in silver armor, emblazoned with flame insignias, swords drawn. "Protect the sentinel!" Silas commanded as chaos erupted. The vampires moved with supernatural speed, engaging the intruders. Silas himself became a blur of motion, his formal attire replaced by the predator beneath as he tore through 2 knights with terrifying efficiency. A shadow walker lunged toward Elara, its form passing through the solid table. She stumbled backward, instinctively raising her hands. To her shock, the creature recoiled as if burned when it neared her, the darkness comprising its form rippling with distress. The void cannot touch a sentinel directly, Varen explained, appearing beside her. Your blood repels it, which is precisely why the knights need it for their seal. The battle raged around them. But Elara found herself in an unexpected pocket of calm, protected by her very nature from the Shadow Walkers, while Silas and his vampires engaged the knights. Through the melee, a familiar figure emerged, Judge Caldwell, older and more haggard than Elara remembered from just days before. He wore no armor, but carried an ornate staff topped with a crystal that pulsed with sickly green energy. "Elara Thornfield," he called, his voice carrying unnaturally over the sounds of combat. "You don't understand what's at stake. Your sacrifice will save thousands." "After you murdered my kind for centuries?" she retorted, anger burning through her fear. "Necessary sacrifices," Caldwell insisted, approaching steadily despite the chaos. "The void would have consumed everything long ago without our intervention. You created the problem by slaughtering the Sentinel Order," Silas snarled, appearing between Elara and the judge after dispatching another knight. "They maintained the boundaries peacefully for millennia before your order's crusade." Caldwell's face twisted with zealous conviction. "They consorted with abominations like you, creatures that should remain beyond the veil." He raised his staff, the crystal flaring brighter. "The girl comes with us. Her blood will reseal what has broken." "There's another way," Elara said, stepping forward despite Silas's protective stance. "I can repair the breach without dying." Something flickered across Caldwell's face, not surprise, but confirmation. "So the vampire lord has fed you that falsehood?" "Yes. The ancient texts mention such methods, but they never succeeded. Every sentinel who attempted to channel the sealing power was corrupted, becoming a gateway themselves, rather than closing one." A deafening roar shook the castle, followed by the sound of shattering stone. Through the windows, Elara glimpsed the eastern tower collapsing, but not from any physical attack. The very air around it seemed to fold inward, reality itself buckling. The breach has reached critical expansion, Varen announced, her blind eyes wide. We have minutes, not hours. Decision crystallized within Ilara. Take me to it, she demanded. I'll try to close it myself. Ilara, Silas began. I won't be sacrificed like an animal, she interrupted, but I won't stand by while everything is destroyed either. She turned to Varen. Guide me. The blind seeress nodded. This way. Caldwell moved to intercept them, but Silas was faster, driving the judge back with inhuman strength. Go! He shouted to Ilara. I'll hold them here. Varen led Ilara through a side passage, navigating the castle's labyrinthine corridors with the confidence of one who could see perfectly. Behind them, the sounds of battle faded, replaced by an increasing distortion in the air, a high-pitched whine that vibrated through Ilara's enhanced senses like broken glass. They emerged onto a walkway connecting the main keep to what remained of the eastern tower. The sight before them defied comprehension. Where the tower had stood, a swirling vortex of absolute darkness twisted, its edges fraying reality itself. The stones around it didn't simply crumble, they unraveled, matter dissolving into nothingness. The breach, Varen confirmed unnecessarily, growing larger with each passing moment. Ilara felt it pulling at her, not physically, but at some deeper level, as if it recognized something in her blood. The newly awakened power within her responded, thrumming with potential. What must I do? She asked, raising her voice over the breach's unearthly keening. You must reach into yourself and find the boundary sense, the awareness that connects you to all worlds, Varen instructed, gripping Ilara's shoulders. Then extend that sense into the breach itself, finding its edges. Ilara closed her eyes, focusing inward. The power that had awakened during the elixir's transformation pulsed beneath her skin, centered around her birthmark. She visualized it as threads of light extending outward from that mark, reaching toward the distortion. I can feel it, she whispered, like frayed fabric. Good, Varen encouraged. Now imagine weaving those edges back together, using your own essence as the needle and thread. Ilara extended her hands toward the breach, her birthmark blazing with white-hot intensity. The connection established itself immediately. Too powerful, too fast. Pain lanced through her as the void's emptiness touched her consciousness, hungrier than anything she could have imagined. She cried out, nearly breaking the connection, but Varen's steady hands kept her upright. Resist the pull, the seeress instructed. You must remain anchored in this reality while reaching into the breach. Focusing through the pain, Ilara visualized the boundary as she'd seen it on the maps. Lines of force intersecting at precise points. Where the breach had torn them apart, she mentally began reconstructing the pattern, willing the edges to knit together. The breach responded, its outer edges slowly curling inward, but as it contracted, the pull on Ilara intensified. Black veins appeared on her arms as void essence fought to corrupt her living flesh. It's too strong, she gasped, feeling her consciousness beginning to fragment. I can't. Cold hands gripped hers suddenly. Silas stood beside her, crimson eyes blazing. Take my strength, he commanded. Vampires exist partially between realms already. Use me as an anchor. Without questioning, Ilara grasped his hands, channeling her power through their connection. Silas grimaced as the void energy transferred partially to him, but he remained steadfast, his immortal nature better able to withstand the corruption. The knights approach, Varen warned. Caldwell leads them. Keep working, Silas told Ilara. I'll protect you. But he didn't release her hands, seemingly understanding that breaking their connection now would doom her. Instead, he positioned himself behind her, maintaining contact while facing outward toward the approaching threat. Ilara pushed harder, feeling the breach respond. It contracted further, the unnatural darkness shrinking inward. But as it did, images flashed through her mind, glimpses of what lay beyond. A realm of endless shadow where thought itself was consumed. Entities of impossible geometry that regarded human existence as insects might regard bacteria. and among them, something vast and ancient, turning its attention directly toward her. "It sees me," she whispered, terror threatening to break her concentration. "Something in the void is aware of me." "Do not look back," Varen commanded. "Complete the seal before it can reach through." The walkway shuddered as Judge Caldwell and his remaining knights appeared. The old man's face contorted with fury when he saw what Ilara attempted. "Stop her!" he shouted. "The forbidden method will corrupt her completely." The knights rushed forward, but an unexpected ally intercepted them. Cain, bloodied but unbowed, along with several other vampires. They formed a defensive line between Ilara and the approaching humans. "Almost there," Ilara gasped, feeling the breach contracting to a fraction of its original size. The strain was unbearable, black veins now spreading across her face, but she refused to relent. "Just a little more." Suddenly, Judge Caldwell broke through the defensive line, staff raised high. "Forgive me," he cried, bringing it down toward Ilara's head. Silas moved with supernatural speed, catching the staff inches from impact. But the crystal at its tip flared with power, sending him staggering backward, his hands smoking where they had touched the hallowed weapon. The interruption broke Ilara's concentration. The partially sealed breach pulsed, then expanded violently. Wind howled from the darkness, and with it came something physical. A massive appendage like a tentacle, but composed of living shadow, barbed with structures that resembled eyes and mouths. It lashed toward them, wrapping around Caldwell before anyone could react. The judge screamed as it lifted him, his body contorting unnaturally as the void began to consume him from within. "Finish it now!" Varen shouted above the chaos. "Or we are all lost." Ilara struggled to re-establish her connection, but the sight of Caldwell's body being consumed had shaken her focus. The breach expanded further, more tentacles emerging, reaching for the assembled humans and vampires alike. Then Silas was before her, his hands gripping her face, forcing her to look at him rather than the horror unfolding around them. "Focus on me," he commanded. "Only me." His crimson eyes captured hers, and within their depths, Ilara found a strange calm. She nodded, once more extending her power toward the breach, this time with Silas as her focal point, rather than the void itself. The connection re-established, stronger than before. The boundary lines appeared in her mind with crystal clarity, and she began to reweave them with new-found precision. The breach contracted rapidly, the tentacles withdrawing as their anchor point diminished. As the last edges of the tear came together, Ilara felt something unlock within her, knowledge buried in her bloodline for generations. Words in a language she'd never heard, but somehow understood perfectly, formed on her lips, sealing the boundary with ancient power. The breach collapsed with a thunderclap that knocked everyone on the walkway to their knees. Where the swirling darkness had been, now only empty air remained, the castle's eastern section cleanly severed, as if by a surgeon's blade. Silence fell, broken only by the distant sounds of combat elsewhere in the castle. Ilara remained standing, though she swayed dangerously. The black veins on her skin receded, but left in their wake a pattern of faint, silvery lines, like scars that would never fully heal. "It's done," she whispered, then collapsed. Silas caught her before she hit the stone, cradling her against his chest. "Ilara," her eyes fluttered open, but something had changed in them. The green was now threaded with filaments of silver that caught the light strangely. "I sealed it," she murmured, her voice distant. But something came through first. Something small but vital. Her hand clutched at Silas's shirt. "It's inside me now." Varen approached, her blind eyes somehow finding Ilara's with unerring accuracy. "What did you see beyond the veil, child?" Ilara shuddered. "The entity that has been orchestrating everything. It's been manipulating both sides, the knights and the void creatures, for centuries." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And now it knows that I know." Before anyone could respond, a tremor ran through the castle, different from the violence of the breach. This was more deliberate. the entire structure responding to some external force. "What now?" Kane demanded, looking around wildly. The surviving knights, leaderless with Caldwell's demise, backed away in confusion. Without their zealous commander, they seemed uncertain of their purpose. Veren's face had gone pale. "The other breaches," she whispered. "This was just one of 7. The entity, it's using the Sentinel's power through her connection to trigger the others simultaneously." Silas looked down at Ilara with dawning horror. "You've become its conduit." "Not willingly," she gasped, feeling something alien moving through her awakened power, using the pathways she'd established to reach outward. "It's using what I learned to open the others." Another tremor, stronger this time. In the distance, beyond Ravenscroft's walls, a column of darkness erupted from the forest floor. "We must sever the connection," Veren urged, "before all 7 breaches are fully opened." "How?" Silas demanded. The seeress hesitated. "There is only one way I know to break such a connection." Her hand moved to a dagger at her belt. "The entity is using her blood as a conduit. If that blood ceases to flow—" "No," Silas growled, pulling Ilara closer protectively. "There must be another way." Ilara felt the foreign presence spreading through her, reaching toward the other boundary points. Through its consciousness, she glimpsed its plan. 7 breaches strategically placed around the realm, creating a pattern that would permanently weaken the barrier between worlds. The void would never fully consume their reality, but would eternally bleed into it, transforming it into something neither living nor dead. "Wait," she said suddenly, an idea forming. "My blood connects me to the boundaries, but so does his." She looked up at Silas. "Vampire blood exists partially in both realms. If I could use that—" Understanding dawned in Veren's expression. "A blood bond. Ancient sentinels sometimes formed them with trusted allies. It would allow you to filter your power through another vessel. The corruption would transfer to me instead," Silas realized. "My immortal nature might withstand it where her humanity cannot." "It might kill you both," Veren warned. "Such bonds were formed over months of preparation, not in moments of crisis." Another tremor rocked the castle as a second column of darkness appeared on the horizon. Time was running out. "Do it!" Ilara insisted, reaching for Silas's face. "Bond with me." His crimson eyes searched hers. "You understand what this means. Our fates would be eternally intertwined. If one dies, the other follows," she finished. "I understand." Without further hesitation, Silas bit into his wrist, offering the bleeding wound to her. "Drink," he commanded. "Then I must take from you." As Ilara pressed her lips to his wrist, tasting the ancient power that flowed through his veins, she felt the entity within her recoil. It had not anticipated this development. Vampire blood, with its unique properties, disrupted its control. When she had swallowed 3 mouthfuls, Silas gently tilted her head, exposing her neck. "This will hurt," he warned, "but the bond requires an exchange." His fangs pierced her skin with surprising gentleness. As he drew her blood into himself, Ilara felt the connection forming, a bridge between their essences, their very souls intertwining. Through it, she could sense his centuries of existence, the weight of memory and power he carried, and through her, Silas encountered the entity that had invaded her being, ancient beyond comprehension, patient in its malevolence, architect of the conflict between humans and supernatural beings for longer than recorded history. They broke apart, both gasping. Blood smeared Ilara's lips, Silas's eyes blazed brighter than ever, and between them flowed a visible current of power. "I can feel you," she whispered in wonder. "Your thoughts, your strength." "And I you," he replied. "Now let us use this bond to expel our unwelcome guest." Together, they turned their combined focus inward, toward the invading presence. The entity fought back, lashing out with impossible geometries and sensations for which human minds had no reference. But where Ilara's humanity might have broken under such an assault, Silas's vampiric nature, existing as it did on the threshold between life and death, provided an anchor. Through their bond, they pushed against the entity, forcing it back along the pathways it had used to enter Ilara's consciousness. The distant columns of darkness wavered, two of them collapsing entirely. "It's working," Varen observed, her blind eyes seeing what physical sight could not. "The breaches are destabilizing." But as they drove the entity backward, Ilara sensed its desperate final gambit. It could not maintain its hold, but it would not leave empty-handed. It seized upon something deep within her awakened abilities, tearing it free as it retreated. Pain, unlike anything she had experienced, lanced through her, radiating outward through the bond. Silas roared in shared agony as they both collapsed to their knees, still joined by bloody hands. The entity vanished with a psychic scream that echoed across multiple realities. The remaining columns of darkness dissipated like smoke, but Ilara knew immediately that something fundamental had changed. "My power!" she gasped, clutching her birthmark which no longer glowed. "It took something from me, from us." Silas helped her to her feet, both of them unsteady. "What exactly did it take?" Ilara searched within herself, finding the sentinel abilities still present, but altered. "The boundaries sense," she realized. "I can still perceive the boundaries, but no longer manipulate them." Her eyes met his. "It stole the key to opening and closing the gates between worlds." "Then we must recover it," Silas stated with grim determination, "before it finds another way to use that power." Varen approached, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "The entity has retreated to its own realm for now, but it has what it sought, a fragment of sentinel power extracted from its living source, and through your bond it has tasted vampire essence as well." "What does that mean?" Ilara asked. "It means," Silas answered gravely, "that when it returns, and it will return, it will come for us both. And through our bond, it can find us anywhere in this realm." The implications settled over them like a shroud. The breach was sealed, the immediate danger averted, but a greater threat loomed on the horizon. An entity older than time now possessed the key to the boundaries between worlds, and two individuals uniquely capable of tracking it. "Then we must find it first," Ilara declared, new resolve hardening within her. The frightened merchant's daughter, who had awaited execution in Market Square, was gone, replaced by something neither fully human nor supernatural. A sentinel bonded to a vampire lord, marked by the void itself. She looked out over the damaged castle toward the forest beyond, feeling the entity's retreat like a cold current flowing away from them. "It believes it has wounded us, weakened us beyond recovery. Then it does not understand what it has created," Silas replied, his hand tightening around hers. "What begins in blood does not end easily." As dawn broke over Ravenscroft's shattered eastern face, painting the destruction in harsh light, Ilara felt the bond between them strengthen rather than fade. Whatever had been taken from them, something new had been forged in its place, a connection that transcended the boundaries the entity sought to manipulate. And through that connection, she sensed the path they must follow to recover what was stolen before the entity could use it to tear apart the very fabric of reality. The air in Ravenscroft had changed, charged with an undercurrent of anticipation as survivors worked to rebuild what had been destroyed. 2 weeks had passed since the breach, and Ilara stood at the edge of the shattered eastern tower, gazing out at the forest below. The bond between her and Silas pulsed steadily in her chest. A second heartbeat, constant and reassuring despite the distance currently between them. She felt him before she heard him, a subtle shift in the connection that drew her attention to the doorway behind her. "The last of the knights have been escorted to the boundary," Silas said, stepping onto the broken terrace. "Those who survived have renounced their vows to the hallowed flame. It seems Caldwell's death has fractured their resolve." "Or perhaps they've finally seen the truth," Ilara replied, turning to face him. "That they've been pawns in a game played by something ancient and patient." In the fortnight since forming their blood bond, Ilara had changed in subtle yet unmistakable ways. The silver threads in her green eyes had stabilized, giving them an otherworldly luminescence. Her movements had acquired a fluid grace that mirrored Silas's own, and her senses remained heightened beyond normal human capability. The silvery scars left by the void's touch traced patterns across her skin that shifted subtly with her moods, visible evidence of what she had endured. "Lady Varen believes she's identified the entity," Silas said, joining her at the edge. "Her research suggests it is something the oldest texts call the Architect, a consciousness that exists primarily in the void, but has been attempting to bridge realities for millennia." The Architect. Ilara tasted the name, finding it both fitting and inadequate. Through the fractured memories she'd gleaned during their connection, she'd sensed something less like a being and more like a living equation, cold, calculating, inexorable in its purpose. "And what does she believe it plans to do with the fragment of my power it stole? Create a permanent threshold between our world and the void, not to consume our reality, but to transform it into something that can sustain its existence on this side." He reached for her hand, the contact strengthening their bond immediately. Through it, she felt his concern, his determination, and beneath it all, a protectiveness that had evolved into something deeper neither had yet named aloud. "I've been practicing," she said, changing the subject as she led him toward a small table where various objects had been arranged. "The bond has altered my abilities in unexpected ways." She selected a small silver hand mirror and held it up between them. With her free hand, she touched its surface, concentrating on the boundary between reflection and reality. Though she could no longer manipulate the greater boundaries between worlds, this smaller magic remained within her grasp. The mirror's surface rippled like disturbed water. Within its frame, the reflection shifted to reveal a different location, the great library where Varen sat among piles of ancient texts. "Remarkable," Silas murmured, watching as Ilara moved the mirror slowly, panning across the library. "You've developed scrying ability." "It's limited," she admitted, as the image faded, the mirror returning to normal. "I can only view places within Ravenscroft, and only briefly. But it's something the entity didn't take from me. Small boundaries, mirrors, water surfaces, shadows, I can still bend these slightly. Which suggests your core power remains, merely transformed rather than diminished." His expression grew contemplative. "Perhaps what was stolen can be recovered." The possibility had haunted Ilara since the breach was sealed. Through their bond, she could sense the missing piece of herself, like a phantom limb, present in sensation, if not in substance. And somewhere beyond normal perception, she could feel the entity studying that stolen fragment, learning its intricacies with cold, methodical precision. "Varen believes she's located one of the 7 original breach points," Silas continued, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "A place where the boundary between worlds was artificially weakened centuries ago by the Knight's meddling. And you think we might find some trace of the entity there? Some way to track it to its hiding place? Or at least understand better what it intends?" He met her gaze directly. "But the location is far from here, beyond the North Woods, in territories neither vampire nor human have safely traversed in generations." "The Blighted Moors," Ilara guessed, pulling the knowledge from their shared consciousness. Images flashed between them, a landscape of twisted vegetation and shallow pools that reflected skies from another reality. Creatures adapted to life between worlds, neither fully material nor spectral. "We would be hunted from the moment we crossed the boundary," Silas warned. "The journey would be perilous even for one such as myself. For you, despite your awakened abilities—" "I'm not afraid," Ilara interrupted, though they both knew it for a half-truth. The bond made deception between them nearly impossible. "And I'm stronger than I was. Whatever the entity took from me, it left something else in its place." This at least was entirely true. Since the breach, Ilara had discovered new resilience within herself, physical strength beyond human norms, accelerated healing, and a tolerance for pain that would have seemed impossible before. The Void's touch had changed her, and the vampire blood now mingled with her own had transformed her further. "We leave at midnight," Silas decided, his concern evident but his respect for her determination stronger. "Cain and Isolde will accompany us to the edge of the moors. Beyond that, the bond between us must be our primary protection." As night fell over Ravenscroft for what might be their final time, Ilara completed her preparations. She dressed in clothing Lyra had procured, practical garments of supple leather and dark fabric, designed for movement rather than court appearances. Around her neck, she fastened a pendant Varen had given her, a small crystal vial containing a mixture of her own blood and Silas's, a physical focus for their bond should they become separated. In the courtyard, their small party gathered. Cain and Isolde were already mounted on strange beasts that resembled horses, but moved with silent, predatory grace. Silas waited beside a third such creature, its midnight coat gleaming like oil under the moon. "You won't require a mount of your own," he explained as she approached. "Shadow steeds cannot bear two riders unless they share blood. Fortunately, we qualify." He helped her onto the creature's back before mounting behind her, his arms encircling her waist as he took the reins. The intimacy of the position was not lost on either of them, but practicality overshadowed any awkwardness. Through their bond, physical proximity only enhanced their awareness of each other, thoughts, emotions, and intentions flowing between them like water. "Ravenscroft stands ready in your absence, my lord," Varen said, approaching to bid them farewell. Her milky eyes found Ilara with uncanny accuracy. "Remember, Sentinel, what was taken by force may only be reclaimed through sacrifice. The architect deals in equivalencies." Before Ilara could ask what sacrifice the seeress foresaw, the shadow steeds leapt forward, passing through Ravenscroft's gates at speeds no earthly mount could match. The forest blurred around them, trees becoming streaks of shadow against the night. The bond between rider and mount was evident in how the beasts navigated the darkness, avoiding obstacles Ilara could barely perceive, even with her enhanced vision. They rode through the night, the north woods gradually thinning around them as they approached its outer boundary. By the time dawn threatened the eastern horizon, they had reached their first major transition, the edge of vampire territory, beyond which lay the contested borderlands where neither supernatural courts nor human kingdoms claimed sovereignty. "We rest here until dusk," Silas announced as they dismounted beside a clear spring emerging from between ancient stones. "The borderlands are best traversed by night." As Cain and Isolde established a perimeter, Ilara knelt beside the spring, staring into its crystalline depths. With her newfound sensitivity to boundaries, she could perceive how this water originated from somewhere beyond normal reality, a pure source untainted by either world, existing in the threshold between. She dipped her fingers into the cool liquid, concentrating on its surface as she had with the mirror. The water stilled unnaturally, its surface becoming reflective as polished silver. Within its depths, shapes moved, indistinct at first, then resolving into a vision of a desolate landscape where the laws of physics seemed mere suggestions. "The blighted moors," she whispered. Silas appeared beside her, gazing into the vision she had conjured. "Something waits for us there. It knows we're coming." The vision shifted, focusing on a structure that defied comprehension, a tower that appeared to be constructed from solidified darkness, its architecture an affront to Euclidean geometry. At its pinnacle, a light pulsed, not the warm glow of flame or sunlight, but a cold radiance that reminded Ilara of the silvery traces on her own skin. "The fragment," she breathed, instinctively reaching toward the image. "I can feel it calling to me." The moment her fingers touched the water, the vision shattered, the spring returning to its natural state. But the connection had been established. She could sense the direction now. the pull of her stolen power like a lodestone drawing her toward true north. "The architect has constructed a focal point," Silas observed, his expression grim. "A physical anchor in our reality, which means it's vulnerable," Isolde interjected, having approached silently during their scrying. "If it's manifesting physically, it can be physically destroyed." Cain rejoined them, his perpetual alertness momentarily softened by curiosity. What manner of weapon could harm such an entity? "Not a weapon," Ilara said with certainty born of instinct rather than knowledge. "A key." She touched her birthmark, which had remained dormant since the breach. "Me, us. The bond between sentinel and vampire. It's what the entity has been studying all this time, trying to replicate without understanding." They rested through the day, though sleep eluded Ilara. The closer they drew to their destination, the more strongly she felt the pull of her stolen power. Through their bond, she sensed Silas's growing concern, not for himself, but for her. The vampire lord, who had once seemed the epitome of cold calculation, now harbored emotions that would have been unrecognizable to him before their paths had crossed. As dusk approached, Ilara found herself seated beside Silas at the edge of their small camp, watching as the last light faded from the sky. "What do you remember of your life before Blackmere?" he asked unexpectedly, his voice low enough that even the sharp-eared Cain and Isolde could not overhear. The question startled her. "Very little. My earliest memories are of my grandmother's cottage near the village wall." "Why do you ask?" "Because I believe there's more to your story than even you know." His crimson eyes studied her face with an intensity that might once have frightened her. "The sentinel bloodline doesn't appear randomly. It's inherited, which means one of your parents carried it." "My mother died when I was too young to remember her," Ilara said, fragments of recollection stirring. "My father never spoke of her except to say she came from the east, beyond the mountains." "From the direction of the blighted moors," Silas noted. "Perhaps this journey is taking you toward your origins, as well as our shared future." The word future hung between them, laden with unspoken implications. Their blood bond had linked their fates inextricably, but neither had given voice to what that might mean beyond their immediate quest. Before Ilara could respond, Cain approached, signaling that it was time to depart. The final leg of their journey would take them through the borderlands and to the edge of the moors by midnight. The borderlands proved even more treacherous than Silas had warned. Reality itself seemed fragile here, with patches of ground that shifted beneath their mounts' hooves and mists that whispered with voices just beyond comprehension. Twice they encountered creatures that defied classification, neither animal nor monster, but something adapted to life in the margins between worlds. Isolde proved her worth during these encounters, her warrior skills dispatching the threats with efficiency that bordered on artistry. Cain, meanwhile, navigated the increasingly unstable terrain with the confidence of one who had mapped impossible geographies. As midnight approached, they crested a final ridge to behold the blighted moors spread before them, a vast expanse where patches of twisted vegetation alternated with pools of quicksilver liquid that reflected alien skies. And dominating the horizon, exactly as Ilara had seen in her vision, stood the impossible tower of solidified darkness. "The shadow steeds will go no further," Cain announced, as the creatures beneath them trembled visibly. "Even their courage has limits." "Then we continue on foot," Silas decided, helping Ilara dismount. To Cain and Isolde he added, "Remain here with the mounts. If we haven't returned by dawn, return to Ravenscroft and seal its boundaries." The vampire warriors exchanged glances before nodding reluctantly. The loyalty they showed was not merely to their lord, Ilara realized, but to the bond he had formed with her, something unprecedented in their long histories. Hand in hand, Ilara and Silas descended into the moors, each step taking them deeper into a landscape where reality had been stretched tissue-thin. The ground beneath their feet occasionally became transparent, revealing glimpses of the void flowing beneath like dark water under ice. The air itself felt charged with potential, as if lightning might strike from the cloudless night sky at any moment. "It's watching us," Ilara whispered, feeling the entity's cold attention focusing on their approach, evaluating, calculating. "Let it watch," Silas replied, his grip on her hand tightening. "We have something it cannot comprehend, despite its ancient intellect." As they drew nearer to the tower, details of its construction became clearer and more disturbing. What had appeared to be solid darkness from a distance revealed itself as countless interlocking shapes that defied three-dimensional space, constantly shifting while maintaining the overall structure. At its base, the tower melded with the ground, as if growing from the moors themselves rather than having been built upon them. The pulsing light at its pinnacle grew brighter with their approach. Ilara felt the stolen fragment of her power responding, her birthmark beginning to glow faintly for the first time since the breach. "There's no entrance," she observed as they circled the base of the structure. "No door, no window, no opening of any kind." "Because it's not meant to be entered physically," Silas realized. "This is a boundary itself, a manifestation of the threshold between our reality and the void." Understanding dawned. "Then we don't need to enter it. We need to become it." She turned to face him fully. "The bond between us, it's the key, sentinel and vampire, life and undeath, a perfect balance point between realities." Before Silas could respond, the ground beneath them liquefied, swallowing them both to their waists. The tower pulsed, and a voice that was not a voice reverberated through their minds. "Fascinating specimens. Your attempt to reclaim what was taken is admirable, if futile." The architect's communication felt like ice spreading through Ilara's thoughts. Around them, the moors trembled as the entity's attention focused fully on the intruders. "The fragment has been integrated. The threshold stabilizes. Soon your reality will accommodate my existence, and evolution will proceed as designed." "You misunderstand the power you've stolen," Ilara called out, her voice steady despite her fear. "A sentinel's ability isn't just about opening or closing boundaries, it's about maintaining balance. Without that, the power turns against itself." "Incorrect. I have studied the fragment extensively. Its properties are quantifiable, its application measurable." "You've studied a piece without understanding the whole," Silas interjected. "The sentinel bloodline exists in symbiosis with this world. Removed from its living vessel, the power becomes unstable." As if in response to his words, the tower shuddered, momentary distortions rippling through its impossible architecture. At its pinnacle, the pulsing light flickered erratically. "Your deception is transparent. The integration proceeds as calculated." But Ilara could feel the truth through her connection to the stolen fragment. The entity was struggling to contain the power it had taken, to bend it to its alien purpose. The fragment, even separated from her, resisted complete assimilation. "Now," she whispered to Silas, "while it's distracted." Together, they pressed their hands against the liquidized ground that held them. Through their blood bond, they channeled their combined essence: sentinel intuition and vampire resilience, mortal compassion and immortal strength. The ground around them solidified, then cracked as they broke free. With their physical freedom came a surge of power through their connection. The bond between them blazed visibly now, a silver-crimson light that spiraled around their joined hands. Ilara's birthmark burned like a star against her skin as Silas's eyes flared with inhuman intensity. "You cannot calculate what you cannot comprehend," Ilara declared, raising their linked hands toward the tower. "And you cannot comprehend what exists between us." The entity's response was immediate and violent. The tower contorted, sections of it extending toward them like reaching limbs. The ground beneath them heaved and buckled. From the quicksilver pool surrounding them, creatures of hybrid existence emerged, half-formed manifestations of the entity's will. But they stood firm, the power flowing between them, creating a barrier that the attacks could not penetrate. Through their bond, they began to draw upon the fragment trapped within the tower, calling it back to its rightful vessel. Impossible. The integration is irreversible. Nothing is irreversible, Silas countered. Existence itself is change. The tower's pinnacle fractured as the stolen fragment responded to their call, struggling against its artificial containment. Elara felt it reaching for her, recognizing its true belonging. But as it strained toward them, the entity's resistance intensified. The very fabric of reality around them began to tear, the boundary between worlds stretching dangerously thin. "It's fighting too hard," Elara gasped, feeling the strain through their bond. If the fragment breaks free violently, it could shatter the boundary completely. Veren's parting words echoed in her memory. What was taken by force may only be reclaimed through sacrifice. In that moment, Elara understood what must be done. Through the bond, she felt Silas's immediate rejection of her plan, his desperate search for alternatives. But there were none. The mathematics of existence demanded balance. "Together," she insisted, meeting his gaze with newfound serenity. "Not my sacrifice alone. Ours shared equally. That's what the entity cannot comprehend. Willing sacrifice, divided burden." Understanding and reluctant acceptance flowed between them. With a single movement, they stepped forward, directly into the boundary distortion surrounding the tower. Reality shimmered around them as they willingly entered the threshold state, neither fully in their world nor in the void, but perfectly balanced between. From this position of perfect liminality, they called to the fragment with one voice, offering not domination, but partnership, not control, but harmony. The stolen power responded, tearing free from the entity's grasp with a force that sent shockwaves across the moors. "This defies calculation. This cannot be. This is what you failed to understand," Elara explained, as the fragment rejoined her, flowing through their bond to stabilize between them rather than residing solely within her. The power was never meant to be possessed, only shared, only balanced. The tower began to collapse, its impossible geometry folding inward as its anchor point dissolved. The entity's presence receded, driven back toward the void by the restoration of proper balance. But as it retreated, Elara and Silas remained caught in the threshold state, the price of their victory becoming clear. "We cannot return as we were," Silas realized, the knowledge passing between them without need for words. Elara nodded, watching as the moors began to stabilize around them, the boundary between worlds strengthening with the entity's departure. "We've become the living seal, the balance point it tried to create artificially." Through their bond, acceptance flowed, not resignation, but a deeper understanding of what they had become together. Neither fully human, nor vampire, nor sentinel, but something new. Guardians of the threshold, embodiments of balance. As dawn broke over the blighted moors, Cain and Isolde witnessed a phenomenon none had seen in centuries. Where the dark tower had stood, a new structure now rose, a spiraling citadel of crystal and shadow that reflected both sunlight and darkness in equal measure. At its heart, two figures could sometimes be glimpsed moving between worlds, hands eternally clasped, their forms shifting between solid and translucent as they maintained the boundaries the architect had sought to destroy. The Sentinel and the Vampire Lord had not perished, but neither did they continue as they had been. They had become something the entity, with all its ancient knowledge, could never have calculated. A perfect union of opposing forces, creating balance through their willing transformation. And in the threshold between worlds, where time moved differently and possibilities were endless, Elara and Silas discovered that their sacrifice had granted them something neither had dared hope for. Eternity together, maintaining the balance between worlds not as a burden, but as a shared purpose that would unite them long after the names Thornfield and Vane had faded from memory. The bride who had awaited death and the lord who had claimed her had transcended both mortal fate and immortal limitation, becoming instead the living embodiment of the ancient truth that had eluded the architect's cold calculations. That balance is not found in domination, but in harmony, not in separation, but in union, not in calculation, but in surrender. And in that surrender, they had found victory.